Thank God. This incredible HFY masterpiece found you today. Witness the legend starting now. The Intersystem Academy for Harmonious Species. Integration occupied a space. Station so ludicrously massive that it had its own weather patterns. Well, carefully controlled atmospheric phenomena that the marketing department insisted on calling weather patterns because it, music, sounded more prestigious. The station orbited a politically neutral moon, which itself orbited a politically neutral planet, which itself existed in a politically neutral star system that had been specifically chosen because music. Absolutely nothing interesting had ever happened there. Perfect for education. For 300 standard cycles, the Academy had served as the premier music institution for molding the galaxy's youth into proper, civilized, cooperative members of interstellar society. Students from 700 species studied music together, played together, and learned to navigate the complex social dynamics of a universe where your lab partner might breathe methane and music communicate through color-changing skin patterns. The Academy's success rate was impressive. Only 12 major diplomatic music incidents in 3 centuries, and most of those involved the Zinthari, who really should have mentioned music. That their mating season made them temporarily psychotic. The faculty prided themselves on their ability to handle any species, any temperament, any cultural quirk the galaxy could produce. They had protocols for lithium-based life forms, procedures for beings who existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously, and special accommodations for species whose life cycle included a phase as sentient gas. They had seen everything, which made their decision to accept a student from Earth either remarkably, music, or catastrophically stupid. Time would tell. Time always did, usually while music, laughing. Earth, Death World 7 on the official registry. Quarantine status, absolute. Recommended observation protocol. From a significant, music, distance. Preferably from behind something solid. The planet had been flagged by every survey team that had gotten close enough to scan it, and their reports read less like scientific documents and more like horror stories shared around a campfire. Gravity that would crush most species into paste. An atmosphere that was technically breathable, but contained enough oxygen to be mildly flammable. Weather patterns that included water falling from the skies with enough force to be weaponized, and the life forms. Oh, the life forms. The dominant species called themselves humans, and they had done what no rational species should be able to do. They had survived. Not just survived, but thrived on a planet that seemed actively designed to kill them. They had conquered their world through a combination of persistence, spite, and what the xenobiologists politely termed an alarming disregard, music, for reasonable self-preservation. But the galactic community, music, prided itself on inclusivity. After decades of debate, committees, subcommittees, and committees, music, organized specifically to argue about the subcommittees, a decision, music, had been reached. Earth would be allowed to send 1 student to the Academy. 1. Earth music, air as a test. To see if humans could be civilized or if they would do something horrifying, music, like eat their classmates or explode. The human, music, delegation, had accepted with what the diplomats described as ex-suspicious enthusiasm. Music, Professor Kilnix, stood at the main entrance of the Academy's primary educational complex. All 4 of his hands clasped, music, behind his back in a pose he believed conveyed authority. As a Telvri, his species had been guiding galactic, music, education for millennia, and he was not about to let some Death World primitive disrupt his carefully maintained institution. He had prepared. Oh, how he had prepared. The humans, music, dormitory had been equipped with gravity generators, tuned to Earth specifications. The atmospheric mixture had been precisely calibrated. Medical staff had been briefed on human biology insofar as the limited data allowed. Security protocols, music, had been established. The human would be monitored, studied, and carefully guided towards civilized behavior. Everything was under control. The transport shuttle arrived precisely on schedule because even Death Weldus apparently understood punctuality. The airlock cycled, and Professor Kilnix prepared himself to meet whatever horror evolution had sculpted on that nightmare planet. A girl walked out. She was small, barely reached chest height on a standard Telvary, which made her positively diminutive by galactic standards. Soft features, no visible armor plating, music, or natural weapons. Limbs that looked fragile enough to snap in a stiff breeze. She wore what the briefing had called typical Earth adolescent attire. Some sort of cloth covering her torso with a faded image of what might have been a predator's face. Lower limb coverings that had been deliberately torn for reasons. Music. The xenoanthropologists were still debating. And foot coverings, music, that looked more decorative than functional. A bag hung from one shoulder, probably containing music. Whatever primitive tools her species found necessary for education. She smiled at Professor Kilnix, and he noticed her teeth, music, were mostly flat with only slightly prominent canines, practically herbivorous. "Hi," she said in perfectly accented galactic, music, common. At least the humans had bothered to teach their delegate the proper language. "I am really excited, music, to be here. Thanks for having me." Professor Kilnix felt his anxiety drain away. This was no monster. This was a child. Barely threatening, music, enough to disturb a Fluffnarian bunny analog. The committees had been worried about nothing. "Welcome to the Academy," he said, voice warm with relief. "I am certain you will find your time here educational." If Professor Kilnix had been paying attention, if he had been watching closely, he might have noticed music. The way her eyes tracked every movement in the corridor, cataloging exits and potential threats with mechanical precision. He might have observed how she positioned herself with clear sight, music, lines in all directions despite her casual posture. He might have seen that her smile never quite reached those eyes, which remained cold and calculating behind their friendly facade. But he did not notice. None of them did. The orientation proceeded smoothly. The human was introduced to her dormitory cluster, where she would share common spaces with a dozen other first cycle students. The reactions were mixed and telling. Rexith, a Vryn who stood nearly 3 m tall and possessed the kind of natural armor that made personal shields redundant, took one look at the human and dismissed her entirely. Prey, music, species, weak, unworthy of attention. He returned to sharpening his ceremonial combat claws, a habit his species maintained despite having achieved space flight 10,000 years ago. Melora and Jessic, a bonded pair of Quilxie, practically vibrated with anxiety when the human entered the common room. Their species had evolved as prey, music, on a relatively gentle world, and their instincts screamed warnings about predators despite the Academy's assurances of safety. But the human seemed so small, so harmless. They relaxed marginally, though Melora kept one, music, eye stalk pointed at the newcomer at all times. Zorthan, music, who existed as a collective, consciousness distributed across 7 crystalline bodies, found the whole situation amusing. Their species had transcended music, physical concerns millennia ago, and they observed the other students' reactions with the detached interest of a scientist watching bacteria interact. "You are the human," Rexith finally said, his voice carrying music, the kind of dismissive tone that bullies apparently developed regardless of species, from the quarantine world. "That's me," the human agreed cheerfully. "Nice to meet you. I have heard your planet is dangerous." "Music," Rexith continued, his mandibles clicking in what passed for Vryn laughter. "Yet you appear quite fragile. Perhaps the reports were exaggerated." "Maybe," the human said, still smiling. "Earth can be pretty, music, intense." "Intense," Rexith repeated, savoring music, the word. "I come from a world with 6 times standard gravity and atmospheric pressure that would collapse most species' lungs. I wonder what a soft creature like you would consider intense." The human smile widened slightly. "Well, back home we have these things called mosquitoes. They are tiny flying insects that drink blood. Not enough to hurt you, really. But they are super annoying and they can carry diseases that kill millions. Also, we have this weather pattern, called a hurricane, where the wind moves so fast. It can throw cars around like toys. And it can be hundreds of kilometers wide. Oh, and sometimes the ground just shakes and splits open because the planet's crust is actually floating on molten rock and the pieces bump into each other. The room had gone very quiet. And that is normal? Melora asked, her voice small. I mean, it does not happen every day. The human said. Just often enough that you kind of get used to it. Oh, but we did have this one year where a volcano erupted, music. And the ash cloud was so big it changed the climate for like a decade. That was before music, my time, though. History class stuff. Zorthan's crystals flickered with what might have been concern. Music. Your planet attempted to kill your species with climate modification? Well, not on purpose. The human laughed. That is just what music volcanoes do. We have like 50 or 60 active ones at any given time. Professor Kilnix, who had been observing the interaction, felt a small tendril of doubt creep into his mind. He activated his personal data pad and queued up a search for Earth's geological activity. The results made his respiratory organs constrict. The first class, music, was xenobiology, taught by Professor Yinsara, a Kaldorian whose species had been studying comparative biology since before humans had discovered fire. She was brilliant, patient, and utterly confident. Music, in her understanding of how evolution shapes species across the galaxy. Life, she began, her voice resonating through the lecture hall, follows predictable patterns. Prey species develop speed, camouflage, or defensive mechanisms. Predator species develop strength, weapons, or pack tactics. Environmental pressures shape organisms toward optimal survival strategies. This is universal, music, law. The human sat in the third row, taking notes on a primitive paper notebook with a mechanical graphite deposition device. Professor Yinsara found it charmingly archaic. Consider the Vrin, she continued, gesturing to where Rexith sat with his characteristic arrogance. High-gravity world, scarce resources, significant predation pressure. Evolution's answer. Armored hide, enhanced strength. Aggressive territorial behavior. Logical, predictable, efficient. Rexith, music, preens slightly at being used as a positive example. Now, what of humans? Professor Yinsara brought up a holographic image of a standard human anatomy chart. Relatively soft skin, music, no natural armor. Modest strength by galactic standards, minimal natural weaponry. By all standard, music, metrics. This species should have been evolutionary dead end. Prey, music, at best. The human raised her hand. Yes, dear. Professor Yinsara said warmly. Just a clarification question. The human said. When you say minimal natural weaponry, are you counting our endurance hunting capabilities? Because humans can run for hours without stopping. We literally used to chase prey until it collapsed. Music, from exhaustion. It is called persistence hunting. Professor Yinsara's facial tendrils, music, twitched. Hours, without rest. Oh, sure. Some humans, music, do these things called ultramarathons where they run for like 100 miles. Takes most of the day, but it is doable. Our ancestors, music, could track wounded prey for days if necessary. We just kept following until it died. The class was staring now. Melora had wrapped her tentacles, music, around herself in a self-protective gesture. That is atypical, music, for a prey species. Professor Yinsara admitted. Well, we are not really prey species. The human said. We are apex predators. Pretty much the top of the food chain on Earth. I mean, there are some things that can kill us, like sharks or bears or crocodiles, but usually only if we are being careless. Mostly, we are the scary ones. Apex predators? Rexith scoffed. Music. You are barely larger than a quilxie. What could you possibly hunt? Mammoths, mostly. The human said casually. At least our ancestors did. They were like these huge hairy elephant things. Probably weighed 6 tons each, had massive tusks. We used to hunt them by working in groups, using tools and tactics. Before that, we hunted other megafauna to extinction. We are actually really good at extinction events. Caused a bunch of them, survived a bunch more. Professor Yinsara was rapidly accessing her database, cross-referencing human evolutionary history with what the student was describing. The data was fragmented. Music. But what she found made her respiratory rate increase. Your species hunted creatures weighing 6,000, music, kilogram? She asked carefully. Well, yeah. We needed the meat and fur. Earth gets really cold, music, in some places. Like cold enough to kill you in minutes if you are not prepared. So, we needed protection, music, and the big animals had the best pelts. How cold? Zorthan asked, their crystals pulsing with genuine curiosity. The human considered. Average winter temperature where my ancestors, music, evolved was probably around -20 degrees. Sometimes colder. Water turns solid at 0 for reference. You lived, music, in environments where the primary solvent of life undergoes phase transitions. Professor Yinsara's voice had climbed an octave. And this was considered, music, normal? I mean, we invented insulated clothing, music, and heating systems pretty early on. The human said, problem solving is kind of our, music, thing. When the environment tries to kill you, you adapt or die, and humans are very good at not dying. The professor made a note to substantially revise her lecture materials. Lunch in the Academy's massive cafeteria was an exercise in cultural exchange. With 700 species represented, the food services had been designed to accommodate practically, music, any dietary requirement. Crystalline species had mineral supplements. Energy beings had specialized radiation booths. Carbon-based life forms had options, ranging from photosynthetic nutrients to various forms of organic matter. The human approached, music, the serving area with her tray, examining the options with interest. She selected what appeared to be a protein synthesized, music, to approximate Earth standard meat, some vegetation that had been analyzed as compatible with human digestion, and what the menu described as a beverage approximating Earth standard water, music, but purified of dangerous minerals. Then she reached into her, music, bag. What is that? Melora asked nervously, eyeing the small container the human had produced. Hot sauce. The human said cheerfully. They tried, but the food, music, here is kind of bland. No offense to the cooks. What does it do? Jessica asked. Makes things spicy. Adds flavor. The human opened the container and applied a small amount to her protein. The pungent aroma made several nearby students' eyes water. Is that a toxin? Rexith demanded, his nose slits flaring. I mean, technically capsaicin triggers pain receptors. The human admitted. It makes your mouth feel like it is burning. But humans like that sensation. Music. We bred plants specifically to be more painful to eat. You consume pain for enjoyment? Professor Kilnix, who had been observing from a nearby table, felt his concern returning with renewed vigor. Sure. Pain reminds you that you are, music, alive, right? The human took a bite and smiled despite her eyes watering slightly. Besides, it is not that hot. I forgot to bring the really good stuff from home. This is only about 50,000 Scoville units. No one knew what a Scoville unit was, but it sounded ominous. You did not answer my question in class, Rexith said, apparently deciding to reassert his dominance. What gives you the right to claim apex predator status? You are small, weak, and soft. The human looked at him, music, with those disconcertingly calm eyes. Well, I would not want to fight you, she said. That would be against Academy rules, and I am here to learn, not cause problems. That is not an answer. Okay, honestly, humans have advantages that are not obvious. Our eyes, for example. She pointed to her own. Binocular vision, excellent depth, music, perception, can track fast movement. We are really good at seeing things. And our hands have precision grips that let us manipulate tools with extreme accuracy. Plus the endurance thing I mentioned. A music. And our brains are wired for pattern recognition and tactical thinking. We can, music, predict what other animals are going to do and plan around it. All species have brains. Rexith growled. Sure, but human brains are weird. We can override our survival instincts with logic. We can make ourselves, music, do things that scare us because we understand why it is necessary. And we are really good at cooperation. Like, scary good. We can coordinate in groups to, music, accomplish things that would be impossible individually. This is standard pack predator behavior. Rexith dismissed. Maybe, but we take it further. We can cooperate with complete strangers, even different species. Music. We can create social structures with millions of individuals working toward common goals. And when we decide something needs to be music done, we are incredibly persistent. Like, we shot ourselves into space, music, using controlled explosions before we really understood the math properly. Just decided, music, we were going to do it, and kept trying until it worked. Zorthan's crystals, music, flickered rapidly. You achieved spaceflight through trial and error? That seems inefficient. Music, oh, it was super inefficient. People died. But we did it yet anyway because humans are really bad at accepting limitations. The table had gone quiet again. This kept happening. Physical education was mandatory at the academy, designed to help maintain whatever form of fitness their species required. The gymnasium was equipped with variable gravity zones, atmospheric controlled sections, music, and specialized equipment for species ranging from aquatic to photosynthetic. Today's assessment was endurance-based. Each student, music, would run at their species' optimal pace for as long as they could maintain it. The results would establish baselines for personalized fitness programs. Rexith, predictably, went first. He thundered across the track in the high gravity zone, his armored form shaking the floor with each step. He managed 6 laps before his breathing became labored. Respectable for a Vryn, and he made sure everyone knew it. Melora and Jessica opted for the low gravity zone, their species having evolved in gentler conditions. They completed their assessment adequately, managing 12 air music laps before exhaustion set in. Various other species cycled through, each performing within expected music parameters. Then came the human's turn. She had changed music into what she called athletic wear, thin, flexible fabric that, music, seemed utterly inadequate for physical exertion. She stretched briefly, performing movements, music, that suggested extremely flexible joints. Then position hearse,